The trailers have dropped for Christopher Nolan's much anticipated adaptation of Homer's The Odyssey, and the hype has officially begun. But while we wait for its big summer release, the question is, what do we watch in the meantime? Welcome to WN Movie Talk, and in this video I'm recommending 10 movies to watch if you can't wait for Nolan's Odyssey. Films that explore epic journeys, obsession, survival and that long road home. Homer's The Odyssey isn't just an adventure story, it's a psychological endurance test. A hero defined not by strength, but by cunning, patience, and the ability to survive forces far beyond his control. Gods interfere, time stretches, identity fractures, and the concept of home becomes increasingly abstract the longer the journey lasts. Which is why Nolan feels like such a natural fit. This is the filmmaker obsessed with time dilation, fractured narratives, moral consequence, and characters who lose themselves in the pursuit of a singular goal. Nolan's protagonists are modern mythic figures, brilliant, flawed, and haunted. So the following movies aren't just sword and sandal epics, they're spiritual cousins. Stories about journeys that change the traveller forever. Troy, the director's cut. 2004. Wolfgang Petersen's Troy in its director's cut deserves a second look. Brad Pitt embodies Achilles with restless arrogance, Eric Bana brings nobility and quiet tragedy to Hector, and Sean Bean quietly steals the film as Odysseus, using intelligence and restraint to navigate the chaos of war. Petersen strips away the gods but preserves the inevitability of fate, grounding Homeric myth in human consequence and moral tension. For anyone preparing to watch Nolan's Odyssey, this version of Troy is a useful guide to seeing Odysseus as a hero defined by intellect and cunning rather than brute strength. By removing divine intervention, Petersen hints at a mythological story told through human psychology and decision making, a lens Nolan is likely to explore in his own adaptation. Clash of the Titans from 1981. Desmond Davis's Clash of the Titans stands as a cornerstone of classic mythological cinema, brought to life with groundbreaking stop-motion effects by Ray Harryhausen. Harry Hamlin stars as Perseus, embarking on a quest filled with gods, monsters, prophecy and the weight of destiny, whilst Laurence Olivier brings gravitas and authority as Zeus, embodying divine meddling with every appearance. Davis embraces spectacle wholeheartedly, making the trials of heroes and the whims of gods vividly tangible. This film earns its place on the list because it captures the mythic worldview Nolan will inevitably be engaging with, a world where heroes are tested, fate is unavoidable, and higher powers shape the journey. Nolan's approach will likely be more grounded and psychologically nuanced. Clash of the Titans reminds us how thrilling and timeless these legendary trials can be when presented larger than life. Oh, and there's a slightly less epic modern CGI remake starring Sam Worthington, in case you'd rather watch something newer. Aguirre, The Wrath of God, 1972. Werner Herzog's feverish masterpiece stars Klaus Kinski as Lope de Aguirre, a conquistador leading a doomed expedition down the Amazon in search of El Dorado. Shot under genuinely dangerous conditions, the film feels unstable and alive with peril, each frame reflecting the instability of Kinski's feral, unpredictable performance. Herzog turns the jungle itself into a force of nature, hostile, indifferent and omnipresent. This is the Odyssey if the gods have abandoned you. The journey isn't a test, but a punishment, and the environment becomes an obstacle as unyielding as Poseidon's wrath. Nolan often explores obsession as a corrosive, self-consuming force, and Aguirre is the purest cinematic expression of that idea. A man who refuses to acknowledge limits, fate, or humility, ultimately undone by ambition itself. Beowulf, 2007. Robert Zemeckis' Beowulf reimagines one of the oldest surviving heroic epics through a darkly introspective lens, with Ray Winstone voicing a warrior whose legend slowly curdles into regret. Anthony Hopkins lends weary authority as King Hrothgar, whilst Angelina Jolie as Grendel's mother answers her son's death with vengeance, dragging Beowulf into a descent that tests heroism against raw ancestral rage. Like The Odyssey, Beowulf explores legend and myth in a world where monsters and human frailty collide, and where every heroic journey is also a descent into the unknown. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? 2000. Joel and Ethan Coen's Oh Brother, Where Art Thou might seem like a tonal outlier, but it's one of the most direct cinematic adaptations of the Odyssey ever made. George Clooney stars as Ulysses Everett McGill, a fast-talking, self-mythologizing escapee navigating Depression-era America, while John Turturro and Tim Blake Nelson provide comic and moral counterpoints that shape his journey. Along the way, Everett encounters sirens, cyclopses, false prophets, and fate disguised as coincidence, all filtered through the Coens' signature blend of wit, music, and Americana. What makes this film essential is how it proves the Odyssey is endlessly adaptable. Whilst Nolan's take will undoubtedly be serious and epic in scale, Oh Brother, it's a clever, playful, and surprisingly faithful journey that honours the spirit of Homer. If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, make sure to like the video. It really helps push this kind of long form content to more movie lovers. And tell me, which movies would you recommend to anyone anticipating Nolan's adaptation of Homer's timeless epic? And if you want deep dives into epic cinema, cult classics and iconic filmmakers, then subscribe to WN Movie Talk and check out our back catalogue. The Lord of the Rings trilogy, 2001 to 2003. Peter Jackson's monumental adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings trilogy stars Elijah Wood as Frodo Baggins and an ensemble cast that brings Middle-earth vividly into life. Jackson turns a sprawling literary epic into a cinematic journey filled with peril, mythic stakes and profound psychological trials, blending large-scale battles with intimate character arcs. Like Odysseus, Frodo's quest is defined by endurance and the slow erosion of self under impossible pressure. Every step carries consequences. Every companion embodies loyalty or temptation, and the road home is anything but simple. If Nolan wants to explore the tension between epic spectacle and intimate human struggle, then Jackson's trilogy is a masterclass in how the two can coexist. Apocalypse Now, 1979. Few films have achieved mythic status like Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, which stars Martin Sheen as Captain Willard, sent upriver on a mission that gradually strips away his sanity. Marlon Brando looms as Colonel Kurtz, a godlike, terrifying figure whose presence dominates every scene he inhabits. The production itself became legendary for its chaos, and Coppola channels that instability into the film's hallucinatory atmosphere, where every stop along the river feels like a descent into a new moral and psychological abyss. Structurally and thematically, the film mirrors the Odyssey almost perfectly. Each encounter tests Willard in a different way, whilst Kurt functions as a twisted mythological figure, part prophet, part monster, part warning. Nolan has long explored moral ambiguity and the cost of confronting forces beyond comprehension, making Apocalypse Now an essential companion for anyone thinking about the psychological and existential dimensions of the Odyssey. The Northman, 2022. Robert Eggers' The Northman stars Alexander Skarsgård as a prince driven by vengeance, fate, and an unbreakable belief in destiny in a brutal reworking of Norse myth. Eggers roots the film in ritual, prophecy, and ancestral memory, presenting violence as something ordained rather than chaotic. The story unfolds like a saga passed down, where belief shapes reality and the gods linger at the edges of human action. The journey is spiritual, physical and psychological, demanding sacrifice at every turn. Monsters may be absent, but fate itself becomes the antagonist, an unseen force closing in on the hero with every step. If Nolan's Odyssey leans into inevitability and consequence, then The Northman feels like a necessary companion. Lawrence of Arabia, 1962. If Nolan is chasing scale, then this is the gold standard. Directed by David Lean, Lawrence of Arabia stars Peter O'Toole as T.E. Lawrence, a performance that begins with boyish eccentricity and gradually hardens into something far more fractured and unsettling. Supported memorably by Omar Sharif, the film follows Lawrence's journey through the Arabian desert during World War I. But the true story isn't the campaign, it's the internal transformation. Lean uses vast, unforgiving landscapes to mirror Lawrence's growing ego and detachment, turning environment into psychology. The connection to the Odyssey lies in the cost of the journey and the transformation of its hero. Like Odysseus, Lawrence becomes a legend whilst losing touch with his original self. The desert replaces the sea, but the idea is the same. The journey creates the myth, and the myth consumes the man, the hero drifting ever further from who he once was. Before we get into the final entry, and if you've made it this far, then please give us a like and hit that subscribe button now, and then drop a comment with the film that you think best prepares us for Nolan's Odyssey. I'll be reading every single one. Interstellar from 2014. Christopher Nolan's Interstellar stars Matthew McConaughey as Cooper, a man who leaves home knowing he may never return, navigating environments shaped by forces beyond human comprehension. McConaughey anchors the story with a performance driven by love, guilt and the hope of reunion, themes that resonate with Odysseus' long struggle to return to Ithaca. Time itself becomes both enemy and obstacle, stretching the journey into something unbearably tense and emotional. Strip away the science and Interstellar is already myth, a man lost between worlds, confronting fate itself in a quest to return home, which makes one thing clear: Christopher Nolan has been telling the Odyssey all along.